Everybody is feeling in the need. I think we just need a little drink coming our way. Whether it's a cup of tea, maybe a chamomile tea would be quite nice. Let's see what Sister Suze has on offer tonight.
Well, I was thinking we could have a rhubarb cider. It's very delicious. It's quite tart and just slightly different, a different take on an apple cider. Have a rhubarb cider.
I'll go along with that. How strong is that?
4%, so not too crazy.
Okay, well, either that or chamomile tea to get us through to the end of the show. Thank you, Suze. Today's confession comes from Alistair. I think it's just
on a whim.
Yes.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, let's just go with it. Mm-hmm. Dear Simon and the Forgiving Fellowship, I might have changed that, or maybe I haven't changed that. I don't know. Anyway, I think it's going to be fine.
So.
If I may, I need to draw very deeply on the wells of your forgiveness in order to explain what went wrong on this infamous evening. I need to explain the architecture of our residence, a flat in South Devon. Essentially, it's an old, large house which has been divided into 4 separate flats, each with their own front door. My parents' flat at number 4 was on the first floor with just one entry and exit. Number 3, beneath us, also had a garden.
Okay, so that's on the ground floor.
That's the number 3 is on the ground floor.
Yeah.
My parents' flat, number 4, is on the first floor.
Okay.
Just above number 3.
Okay. Where are 1 and 2 then?
Where are 1 and 2?
On the other side.
On the other side of the house.
One day, my father decided that we needed to fit... Stop questioning. Go with it. It's Alistair you need to be
Of course. Yeah.
One day, my father decided that we needed to fit a new lock to the front door. Now, anyone who's attempted such a task will know that this can actually be quite a tricky job. Maybe get a specialist, I'd say.
Yeah.
But to his credit, my father selected a lock from the blacksmith, which was actually pretty high quality, and then proceeded to successfully fit it himself. When the mood takes him, my father can be a pretty diligent character, and that late afternoon sat down to read and digest the instruction manual. After some time, he called us down to the front door to view his handiwork and explain the lock's various functions. This is father speaking now.
Yeah.
One very interesting feature, family, pay attention please. I'm not sure why you'd want the deadlock, but basically when you open the door, if you turn the key the opposite direction, it locks the door so it can only be unlocked from outside with the key. In explaining this to us, he then proceeded to demonstrate the feature by turning the key in the lock 2 times the wrong way and slamming the door with us inside the flat. He then showed us quite proudly how the door could not be opened, before, after quite some time, dawning on him that he had in fact locked the whole family in the flat. I should perhaps at this point let you know that this was in the days before mobile phones and the internet. My parents did not have a phone line at the time, and indeed even now there is no phone line or broadband in the flat. We were therefore totally stranded and locked in. Downstairs in flat number 3 lived Muriel, a kind and gentle septuagenarian, and on this particular evening she was being visited by her friend Bert, who would regularly pop over for tea and tiffin.
I'll bet he would. Yeah.
Maybe Muriel could be our salvation. But how? Perhaps at this point it would be helpful to switch the vantage point to Muriel and Bert, who were no doubt just settling in for a Sunday evening of tea and crumpet.
Oh, come on.
And songs of praise.
Yeah.
Yes.
No doubt it was the Antiques Roadshow that was just coming on. Fair enough. Yeah. The reassuring theme tune just giving way to the dulcet tones of Hugh Scully, welcoming viewers to the show, when suddenly they started to hear a tapping noise on the window, quite faint but also persistent. This must have been a pretty unsettling moment for Muriel and Bert, but I'm sure this disquiet would have shortly given way to confusion as they gingerly opened the curtains, only to be greeted by an upside-down coat hanger with a piece of paper sellotaped to it with the word "help" written on it and an arrow pointing upwards. It's like a cartoon. After some explanation of our predicament, Bert agreed that if we chucked the keys down to him, he would let us in. Unfortunately, or let us out even.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it was a little bit dark by this time, and when the keys were dropped, we heard Bert in his deepest Devonshire accent say, "I've dropped the blooming keys in the bush now." After much time and with encouraging words from us, Bert on his hands and knees, scrabbling around looking for them, eventually he did find the keys. Bert then kindly came round to the front door of our flat to release us from our incarceration. There was much laughter and apologies, and after words of thanks, Bert and Muriel retired to enjoy their evening songs of praise, crumpet, tiffin, and so on. "You idiot," my mum said to my dad. I've never been so embarrassed in my life. How did you manage it?" "I don't really know," replied my dad. "All I did was turn the key like this, then close the door like this," slamming the door, and...
Oh, no, not again.
Yes, Father, so my father succeeded in locking us in for the second time that evening, meaning we went through the whole routine. Coat hanger, keys, finger pointing up, Bert and Muriel, songs of praise interrupted. So I seek forgiveness for the second time on behalf of my parents, this time for Muriel and Bert, a kind and lovely pair of retirees who are now long since passed, for disturbing their tete-a-tete not once but twice in one evening. Your consideration on this matter would be most appreciated. Well, I always like it when we verge into sitcom territory, and this is almost like a Bugs Bunny cartoon, to be honest. Sister Susie.
I like that very much, Alistair. I thought the accents were very good, and just the genius idea of putting the coat hanger down, tapping on the window was excellent. However, I don't think I can forgive you, Dad, for doing it a second time, just explaining what he did. So for that reason, he should have been more careful the second time, so I'm not going to forgive him.
Employ a locksmith is what I'd say.
Indeed.
Every single time. Brother Matthew.
I mean, the genius of that is that they do it the second time.
Yes.
How did that happen? Well, I'll show you. Bang! Oh no!
Uh-oh.
Can't get out again. Love it. Why are you making a lock where you can't get out when you put the lock? That doesn't make any. What would be the set of circumstances where you'd want a door to close?
Well, if you're doing
and
it
you not to be able to get out again.
From outside, it's extra security.
Yeah.
But you don't. Basically, you don't.
But you can get
inside.
in from out.
Yes.
Yeah, that makes no sense from the whole premise of locks, as I understand them.
Right.
So for that reason,
Yes.
I'm going to forgive.
Based on your knowledge of locks. Okay.
Yeah.
People's verdict, please, for Alistair 61054. First word is Simon for the People's verdict. Just before the news, a confession from Alistair. A story of... Basically, it was about Alistair's dad, who was very proud of the fact that he fitted a new lock into the flat, except by using the deadlock, he locked the entire family in. He then raised the attention of the old couple downstairs,
Yes.
only to lock himself in a second time. The People's verdict, here it comes.
So Teresa says, I'm going to forgive purely because that was so funny. I have tears streaming down my face. It's brightened up my evening.
Excellent.
Tommy in Torquay, forgiven, hilarious. The fact he did it twice is just fantastic. Honest mistake and no one got hurt. I'm sure the old lady downstairs found it humorous too. But Gareth says not forgiven. As a locksmith myself,
There
he
you go.
should have rung me or one of my mates up to sort it. This is why you get us in to do the job.
Correct. There are some things where
Yeah.
you need a specialist,
Correct.
and fitting a lock is just one of them. Alistair, thank you very much indeed for the confession. Thank you very much for the verdicts. If you have a confession, send it to confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. Confession time, the brand new podcast arrives every Friday. And hark, there's the drinks trolley. What refreshments have we taken and sustenance? What have you provided for us today, Suze?
I've selected a very refreshing, and Matt is probably going to say boring, but I think refreshing if you use fresh limes, a lime and soda, a pint.
Oh, lime and soda.
I think that's one of the best soft drinks to have. If you're in the pub and you're the
Oh, really?
driver, lime and soda, fantastic.
Aha.
Very good. Yes, I can tell that he's not impressed. But
Twist
anyway,
of gin,
Yeah.
maybe. And then, yeah.
not if you're the driver.
Yeah.
Today's confession comes from Damien. We're hinting at Christmas here, and Christmas confessions, of course, will be arriving very shortly. But Damien says, Father Simon and the Holy Communion. I feel now is the time to confess to an act that was committed several years ago, and I feel I need to cleanse my deepest soul. It's December 1997. And I was a student at a certain university. I had taken a year out from college to work and save for university, but somehow managed to blow all my money in the first few months.
Yeah.
Funny how that happens. As a result, I needed to find work, and as Christmas was approaching, I managed to find a job at a catalogue shop.
Could be any, couldn't
Gotcha.
it? So many of them.
My job back in the day.
Yeah.
Were there lots?
No.
My job entailed putting cages and cages of stock away on the shelves from deliveries. Myself and a few others would work the grueling twilight shift, which was from 6 p.m. till midnight. Despite the unsociable hours, the group of guys I used to work with were a good laugh, and we would pass the time by playing the radio really loud as the store had closed and playing the odd practical joke on each other. This catalogue shop is mainly famous for its toys, and we would often hide in the aisles and squeeze the bellies of Teletubbies, pull the cords on toy ducks, or throw balls at each other. Well, one evening our deviousness reached a whole new level. What caught our naughty attention were the Talk Boy gadgets. You may remember them from the film Home Alone 2. Kevin could speak into the recorder and then play it back with different sounding voices.
Oh, yes.
A nice little device. Well, these Talk Boys on the racking were fully batteried up, fully functional and ready to record. We would often talk into the microphones and record silly messages. They even had a timer so that you could go and put the Talk Boy on somewhere, then a minute later it would go off and scare that whatever out of a fellow employee. We would leave messages like, and here you need to put on a scary voice, please,
good,
Father
good,
Simon.
good, yes.
Oh.
What an excellent day for an exorcism. Or 1, 2, Fred is coming for you. 3, 4, better lock your door.
Oh, that's very good, yeah.
Also,
Creepy.
sometimes dead is better.
Right.
Top horror catchphrases, all very immature, I know, but they were long, grueling shifts and it kept us entertained. I worked there right up until a few days before Christmas, and then I went back home to this particular well-known town for the holidays. A few weeks later, I returned to the store. No, I didn't. I went back to this particular,
other
a different town to begin my second semester at university, or term as it's known.
Yeah.
Even though I didn't work at this particular store anymore, I had been quite friendly with a young lady, we'll call her Alice, and we met up for a drink. Whilst having a chat about Christmas, I asked how the gang at the catalogue store were. There were no mobile phones or WhatsApp groups back then, Father Simon, so I hadn't really kept in touch with them. She then proceeded to tell me then it had all gone a bit bad. When I asked why, she told me the following. She said that while she was working there a few days after Christmas, a couple of very irate customers had come into the store and vented their wrath. They said that they had purchased a Talk Boy to give to their children at Christmas. They then played her some of the messages that had been left on the Talk Boys. Oh, blimey, I thought. I didn't realise the messages were stored. I thought it just deleted automatically. She went on to repeat some of the messages that were played aloud. Some were the scary ones, but also there were some slightly ruder ones.
Oh, yes.
There was also a long played out recording of us running around the aisles and unfortunately using bad language. One of the customers had said that their children had been left traumatized by some of the scary voices that seemed to sometimes go off randomly whilst in wrapping paper under the Christmas tree. One of them, under the tree, still wrapped on Christmas Eve, started wailing, "They're here! They're here!" Cue traumatized family. There was obviously some kind of master reset button that needed to be pressed, but no one had realized that. She went on to tell me that the night manager and all my ex-colleagues had had a severe telling off by the big boss and were actually given a written warning for their antics. Whoa, I said. That doesn't sound good. And it would appear that I had dodged a severe bullet, Father Simon, got out of my job at exactly the right time. So where do I go with forgiveness? First of all, I'd like to see forgiveness from Alice, who had to endure the wrath of irate customers bringing back Talk Boys and playing the scary and obscene messages back to her at customer services. I need to seek forgiveness from those children who were left traumatized by the scary wrapped Christmas presents under the tree, pumping out Jack Nicholson and Freddy Krueger voices, or listening to grown men shouting obscenities at each other whilst working. I also seek forgiveness from my fellow colleagues, as it would appear that they were punished for their antics and I got away with it. And I had a grant. In fact,
oh yes,
I had a bit of a result as I was able to use my staff discount card at the store for a further 18 months.
Wow.
Because no one realised that I'd left. It's a clear example of a prank that had gone wrong, and as Einstein said, every action has a reaction. I think you're just showing off at this point. You'd have to quote Einstein. Good fade. I hand my fate over to you, says Damien. Sister Susie, what do you say?
Well, Damien, it's very funny, but I don't like pranks. And if I'd had one of those talk boys under my tree and it started making noises like Freddy Krueger, I think I would have been slightly terrified, never mind a child. So I can see where they're coming from, and I don't forgive you.
1, 2, Freddy's coming for you.
No thanks. I'm going to forgive. I like the reference to Poltergeist with the here, very good. But the reason I'm going to forgive is surely the manufacturer should be making sure that they should be wrapping up the talk boy, shouldn't they? You shouldn't be able to record before you've actually bought it. And that is a problem with the system once again. So really, if we think about it, Damien hasn't done anything wrong.
Right.
And the 18 months of having the catalogue thing, that sounds good as well. And I'm sure it went well with Alice. So for that reason,
yes,
I'm going to forgive.
61054, first word is Simon for the People's Verdict. Just before the news, we had a little confession from Damien about a Christmas job he had in December 1997, raising a bit of extra money. But it was all about how he and his mates recorded horror messages on those talk boys, one of the toys of the year, and scaring very young children as they lay wrapped underneath the Christmas tree. That's the presents, not the children, obviously. And the People's Verdict is in. Here we go.
So Gemma in Bookham says, I have to forgive Damien for this one. Recording in silly voices when bored in the shop sounds fantastically fun. I think he did rather well in not getting punished. Richard in Cardiff, though, says, not forgiven. I feel sorry for those poor families who bought these lovely presents for their children at Christmas only to find horrible messages recorded on them. I'd have been very upset. But Johnny in Nuneaton says, forgiven. Incredible confession. The thought of the wrapped up toy going off under the tree on Christmas Eve is fantastic. Hilarious.
Also, he kept his staff discount card for 18 months after he stopped working there. Damien, thank you. We will send you and we'll get in touch to discuss our speaker, which is what we do if you get a confession read out. And don't forget, the Confession podcast will arrive with you brand new and rather lovely on Friday. It's time that we had a drink, I think. Matt looks as though he's completely ready for it.
Yes, up for a drink.
There it is. Here comes the drinks trolley, and Susie has got something special lined up, I think.
Yes, I have got something special. I've gone for an espresso martini, but in stout version.
Oh.
Yeah,
so how does that work?
It's Bristol Beer Factory, and they've taken their classic milk stout and infused it with coffee to make a chocolate coffee milk stout.
Ah, yes, there it is.
So but the
chocolate, coffee and milk stout.
Yeah, so the coffee is pulling you one way and the alcohol is taking you another. That's
a bit like life, isn't
asking
it?
Asking for trouble,
yes, I think so.
Only
anyway,
4.5% though, so not too
Matt
crazy.
can have mine.
Yes.
Today's confession is distasteful, so let's give it a 12 certificate,
Wow.
I think.
Excellent.
Yes, I think that's appropriate. Suitably warned. This comes from Monty. Thanks, Monty. Father Simon, Brother Matt, and the Sisters of No Mercy. I'm here to confess a sin that goes back to the late 90s, and I seek redemption. It's the year 1999, and I was a mere 18-year-old student at college. During the summer months, to get a bit of extra cash, I used to work as a security guard at the local motor museum.
It could be any of them. Yeah.
This would basically involve parking and access monitoring of stall holders for motorbike, classic car, all that classic car meets, all those kind of things. That's what we did. Because this was the motor museum.
Yes.
When the sun was shining, it was glorious. Despite the dismal wage of £4 an hour, we would have lots of fun. There was a team of 10 of us, both young and old, and we would be kitted out in security shirts, standard bright yellow high-vis jackets, and most importantly, CB walkie-talkies, so that we could communicate with each other. Our supervisor in charge was a big chap called Stan, who looked a bit like Fred Elliott off Coronation Street.
Oh, yes.
A nice guy, but had a beastly temper when things went a bit wrong. There was a bit of a divide between the old boy guards and the young students, but in general, we seemed to get along despite a few frosty arguments. We had a little porter cabin where we would sit and have breaks and so on, and a big green portaloo next door for when the time came for those kind of activities. Well, it was a hot Saturday afternoon, and I was indeed frequenting the portaloo. For a quick break, I took my great big yellow jacket off to undress my lower clothing, and with all the huff and puff, ended up accidentally dropping my walkie-talkie down the toilet.
Oh, dear.
Down it went, through the hole,
Oh, bye-bye.
and into the cesspit below, where the devil lived.
No, he doesn't.
Oh, bother, I shouted loudly, or maybe something to that effect. I didn't know what to do, but I knew I had to get this walkie-talkie back out. So I went outside and I had a look around. I managed to find 2 large sticks. I went back to the portaloo. I lifted up the whole seating area, and there, amongst other things, was the walkie-talkie.
Oh, what?
What else was in there? No.
Oh.
No, well, it could be just anything. couldn't it?
No, it can't. Well, anyway, move on.
The less said about
I
that, the
spent
better, I
at
think.
least 10 minutes trying to fish it out, and after many attempts of it falling back in,
What, kept falling back in?
it's like some kind of end of the pier amusement when you're trying to get out something nice.
Yeah.
Anyway, eventually I managed to get the walkie-talkie out. But what to do? How do you clean battery-powered machinery? You can't just run it under the tap.
Oh.
And there weren't any antibacterial wipes around. I didn't want to approach Stan and tell him what had happened, as I was worried he might get a little cross. So I did the only thing I could, which was to just take it back to the cabin and put it back in the charging stand and just get another walkie-talkie. The ironic thing was that the now soiled walkie-talkie was labelled number 2. Just thought I'd like
of
to know
course
that.
it was.
Well, all was well for a few hours until I was on the gate in the late afternoon. My colleagues and Stan came out and joined me on the gate, and we were letting the cars in and out. As Stan and I got chatting, I took a glimpse at the walkie-talkie he had in his hand, and you guessed it, there it was with a sticker which said number 2. And he had it in his hand, quite literally. Stan was quite a fidgety chap, and when stood for hours at a gate, he simply couldn't keep still. He would be constantly mucking about with his walkie-talkie, and even at one point, he used the aerial to itch his cheek with.
Oh!
Followed by briefly picking his teeth with it. But every time he spoke into it, I would cringe as to how close it was to his mouth. How could he not smell anything? Anyway, it was a bit of a sly one, was Stan, and would definitely grasp me up to the big boss and cause a drama. I didn't want to get into any of that. I didn't want to give them any more reason to hate students than they already did, because that's what it's about.
Yes, it is, isn't it?
It's a class thing, Father
Yeah,
Simon.
yeah.
I seek forgiveness for not speaking up and warning everyone about walkie-talkie number 2. It was a complete accident, however, and I'm sure Stan and my boss would probably disagree. I also seek forgiveness from any further colleagues that may have used walkie-talkie number 2. It's not as if anyone ever cleans them anyway, so it would probably have been like that for a while. Anyway, I'm just getting rid of my burden and my stain after all these years from 1999. Sister Susie, I know, will be very, very harsh on this man, I think.
Oh, I think Monty's just disgusting. I think if anything, I think we all agree here, if anything falls into a portaloo, you just leave it there, whatever it is.
Well, if it's your wallet and it's got like 300 quid in it, you're gonna go, oh well, never mind.
Yes, that's exactly
Well,
what
I'm
you're
not going to
do.
fish it out with
Yeah,
basically
yeah.
chopsticks, am I? Just absolutely disgusting. And the fact that you didn't even attempt to clean it is even worse. And yeah, I just can't forgive him at all. Disgusting.
Brother Matthew, what do you say?
So I'm going to forgive Monty. I mean, number one, he managed to rescue this walkie. I don't think I'd have bothered. I think I'd have just said, "Oh, it's lost or stolen" or something like that. I'm not going into there with that with some chopsticks. How ridiculous! So definitely well done to him for that. And also, you know, Stan, you shouldn't be using the walkie-talkie to pick your teeth and rub your cheek and do all of that stuff anyway, because nobody ever cleans those things anyway.
That's true.
So, you know, it would have been just as bad if it hadn't been
So
caked
Stan's
in.
fault.
Not the same.
Yes, Stan's
Not
fault
the same.
for exactly the same. So for all of those myriad reasons, I choose to forgive.
Okay, well, I suspect I know where the people's verdict is going to go, but who knows? Monty needs some forgiveness. Does he get yours? 61054 on the text. First word is Simon. Just before the news, we had Wednesday's confession from Monty, who was working at a motor museum, anonymous, or it could have been any of them, and a story of a walkie-talkie, a portaloo, and Big Stan, who needed to scratch his cheek with the aerial.
Yep.
of Walkie Talkie number 2. The people's verdict is in. Here it comes.
So Carolyn in Swanage says, ew, no. He picked his teeth with it? Not forgiving Monty for this one. Tim says, forgiven. I'm with Matt. At least he rescued the walkie-talkie. Imagine just leaving it and someone went into the Portaloo and sat down when suddenly it sparks up with voices coming from down there.
Sounds like our confession from yesterday.
Indeed.
Fact, yes.
Dave from the Ribble Valley says, forgiven. That was quite some feat to fish out the walkie-talkie. Given that I had my appendix removed on Monday, that was equally the funniest and most painful confession I think I've heard. I may have done some damage to my stitches laughing so much. Great show.
Dave, I hope your recovery is swift from now on. If you have a tale, send it to confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. So it's 5:47. This is Greatest Hits Radio playing you Blondie one way or another. Time for the drinks trolley to arrive because we deserve a little cup of tea, maybe, or a glass of water. I don't know. What is it that you've specially concocted for us tonight?
Well, I thought we could open a bottle of sherry.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Pedro
Sherry?
Jimenez.
I've never really recovered from the fact that it was my parents' drink, and I thought,
Oh, right. Not for you.
not really for me.
Right.
But if Susie says this is good,
Yeah.
I'm going to go with it. What's the type again?
Pedro Jimenez. It's the sweet, juicy, intense one. It's great for an after-dinner drink, and it's a great one for Christmas if you're thinking ahead.
Excellent. Well, speaking of which, Christmas confessions will be very welcome as we move into the seasonal period once we actually get to the winter, because we're not there yet. So here's our final autumnal confession, which comes from La-di-da Gunnar Graham. Thank you very much indeed, Gunnar Graham. Dear Father Simon, Mother Superior Susie, Brother Matthew, Sister Holly, and Friar Ted, a.k.a. the Clergy of Clemency. So that's your young son getting his first reference.
Wow.
You have to give him something special. I know as a keen student of this feature, says Gunnar Graham, that you are not well inclined towards military confessions.
Oh, that's true.
This is, I am sure, for the very good reason of taste and decency. However, you may feel that this one is okay as we were only wannabe soldiers. I should say at this point this is because there is a certain military sense of humour, which I'm sure if you're in the military, goes down very well. It often doesn't translate to radio.
It's not for the radio.
Gunnar Graham says, my tale of disgrace takes me back to a summer fair in the town of Hawley in Surrey around 12 years ago. It was a beautiful day at the summer fair, complete with the usual activities as well as a main arena. I was with my family as my father, brother-in-law and sister were in a local pipe band. My dad on bagpipes, my sister on tenor drum, and my brother-in-law on the side drum. The band performed well, playing a selection of pipe band classics, Amazing Grace, Flower of Scotland, Flowers of the Forest, and so on. I'm sure you could add to the playlist with your encyclopedic knowledge of pipe music, Father Simon, but here they had done well and received a good round of applause as they played out of the arena at the end. I don't have, as it happens, a encyclopedic knowledge of pipe music, but I'm learning all the time.
We are, aren't we?
We're going to build a playlist, really, for Christmas. A short time later, says Gunnar Graham, a group of local army cadets doing a marching routine in the arena turned up. They performed a selection of film scores, the Dam Busters, 633 Squadron, that kind of thing, along with Colonel Bogey, the Radetzky March. You get the idea. They went down well and were also able to merit a big round of applause, mostly from beaming parents, seeing their offspring marching in perfect unison, reminiscent of the wildebeest marching past Scar, whilst he is singing Be Prepared in The Lion King.
Oh, right, yeah.
Which is a very, very good musical which you need to try out sometime. Their performance had ended, and still in unison, they marched off flawlessly out of the arena past myself and my family. And this is the reason I'm asking you to forgive my transgression. Because as they passed us, still marching like the Lion King wildebeest, a small devil appeared on my shoulder. I decided to use my voice in what sounded like a distant shout, but as they were quite close, it was just loud enough so they could hear me. In this quiet shout, I called out the words, "Company, ya halt!"
Oh, dear.
Bar the leader of the group, the rest of the troop came to a sudden halt. 3 fell over.
Oh, no.
2 fell on top of each other. A second or two passed when the troop went from the marching wildebeest to a family of meerkats as they looked around haphazardly, wondering what had happened before turning into a stampeding wildebeest catching up session to the leader who hadn't heard what had happened. This, of course, was a huge embarrassment, and this is why I hang my head in shame. Says La-di-da Gunner Graham. I need to ask forgiveness from the kids in the Army Cadets, just in case the leader found out and dished out any military punishments of push-ups or star jumps. Do they still do that? That must have been bestowed on them. Yours faithfully, La-di-da Gunner Graham. I often wonder whether people are tempted to sort of jump in and become the regimental sergeant major just at that moment and shout out different instructions. My guess is there'll be a few military folk who'll go, yes, this happens quite a lot. It's a bit like a fake referee's whistle at a football match. Which obviously can be very annoying and is probably illegal. So we don't encourage anything like that. Anyway, this might be a military confession that is forgivable from Matt's point of view. I don't know, but very few of them forgivable from Susie's point of view.
Yeah, I was on Gunner Graham's side there for a little bit. I quite like the sound of his pipe band and, you know, it sounded like it was really good. And it might be tempting to do what he did, but isn't it just a bit mean? They were only cadets. They were only young. It's just, I just feel like it's almost like pranky, and I don't like pranks and I don't like being mean to people, so I'm not going to forgive Graham because I feel like he should have known better.
Also, the proud families watching on for that wonderful moment, and here is my child doing very well. Oh no, they've all fallen over, and it's actually Gunner Graham's fault. Brother Matthew.
Well, I'm going to forgive. I mean, obviously, as Susie points out, they are only kids, but they've got to learn sometime, haven't they? And you've got to. And how can it be? This can't possibly be the fail-safe where just some bloke shouts out "company halt" and they all stop. I mean, there's got to be a better system than that. Surely.
Imagine if there'd been a battle and La-di-da Graham shouted out the wrong kind of
go
order.
Left.
When they're supposed to go right.
Go right. Yes, oh dear. Well, in which case they need to come up with a better system. Maybe something to do with flags. That's what I would suggest.
Flags.
So
flags.
Like in the 19th century.
Yes, indeed. Do that. Think on that. Pipe bands. So for that reason, because of the flags, I'm going to forgive.
Okay. Well, it's entirely down to the people here. Do you forgive La-di-da Gunner Graham for embarrassing an entire company in a military exercise back in the day? 61054, first word is Simon. Before the news at 6 o'clock, a confession involving some young military types. They were in a pipe band, but because La-di-da Gunner Graham shouted out fake instructions, a whole bunch of them fell over each other and they messed up their big walk out of the stadium. The people's verdict is in.
So Tom says, got to forgive this one. Musicians are always playing pranks on other musicians. It's all part of the fun and character building, ultimately. And Michelle in Edinburgh, though, says, not forgiven. He embarrassed the poor kids. They were all following orders. But forgiven, says Chris in Hemel Hempstead. Anyone with even the slightest connection to the armed forces knows that if you can't take a joke, you shouldn't have joined.
I feel as though Chris might know precisely what Chris is talking about.
Yes, indeed.
Okay, your confession, please. Send them to confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk.